fishing, it's in my soul.
Welcome to the Salt Strong Podcast, disrupting fishing entertainment as you know it. Prepare to laugh. Prepare to get to know fishing legends in a whole new and unfiltered way. And on occasion, you might even learn a thing or two about fishing. Here's your host, Joe Simons. Like diamonds.
Are you religious or spiritual? Or maybe a little bit of both? Hey everybody, Joe Simons, Like Diamonds, back again, Salt Strong Unchurched. This is going to be a fun one. We're talking about religious versus spiritual. I was recently on a podcast where I was asked a question, hey, are you more religious or spiritual? And I had a very specific answer for a specific reason. And I'm going to go into that here during this podcast. And this whole thing kind of started here recently. I was hanging out with a friend who I admire and is going just through a tough time in terms of family relationships. And we were talking about someone else that is also a mutual friend. And he had mentioned, oh, yeah, you know, I really don't like hanging out with him so much because he's so religious. And that kind of caught me off guard because the person that he was describing, which is also my friend, I don't think him as super religious, meaning like a Bible beater, someone who's just all about the rules and the rituals, certainly very spiritual. And so this opened up a conversation with my friend who probably needs to be going to church based on all the things going on in his personal and private life. And I'm not going to condemn because obviously we're all sinners, do some dumb things, but there's some very bad things going on in this person's life. That's all I'll say. And so I'm like, all right, well, why would you say that about so and so? And he went on to say, oh yeah, you know, I can't see him having a beer with us and going out and having fun and maybe telling some crude jokes. And I was like, oh, so that makes that person religious? And he's like, well, yeah, and that what it is. And then we had, you know, a good discussion about religious versus spiritual. And kind of in a sentence, religion is an organized belief system, and that usually includes rules and protocols and rituals, right? And it's usually something done as a group. In general, I feel like you go Wikipedia religion, it's something that is organized and usually done as a group or community. As you probably know, there are many different types of religions throughout the world. And, this podcast, we talk mostly about Christianity, but there are many religions out there. And in general, once again, they are organized and kind of have some rules and beliefs and protocols and usually rituals and usually done together as a group. Whereas spirituality, can't even say that word, that is less about the group and more about the person and our own journey, right? Which is fine. And it's our relationship with God. And that's the good news, right? Is that you can be spiritual and still be a Christian, of course. You can be spiritual and still be incredibly close with God and with Jesus. If you watch the show The Chosen or just read the Bible in general, I think The Chosen just such a good job about talking about and showing just how bad some of the religious leaders were. And I am not trying to say religious leaders are bad, by the way, but in that time, the religious leaders had a ton of power and ironically, ultimately, were a big reason that Jesus, led to basically his death. I mean, the same person who came to save these people was the guy that they were trying to basically destroy because he was so different from, at the time, those organized rules and beliefs and rituals. And Jesus was not even like in the gray area. He was way over here, at least in their eyes. And they wanted to kill him because he was getting so much recognition and performing miracles and doing things that these Pharisees and a lot of the religious leaders at the time could not do. And so spirituality, on the other hand, in terms of being not necessarily the opposite of religious or religion, but in terms of your relationship with Jesus, it was so powerful. This past, 2 weeks ago now, Sunday on Easter, I ended up watching a couple of different Easter services that afternoon, and I can't get enough, in my opinion. And 12 Stone is a church that we used to go to back in Georgia. And I still love watching 12 Stone, especially if Kevin, the pastor Kevin, who's the main guy, is up there speaking. And he went on to kind of started this whole conversation off with talking about candy, right? And in particular, he had a chocolate Easter bunny. And he says, all right, raise your hand in the congregation if you like dark chocolate. And then he said, all right, raise your hand if you like milk chocolate. And it was 50-50, let's just say. And he says, that's a good example, right? We have two different types of people who like different things. And the reason is because it's an opinion, right? It's not something that is written in stone. It's not something that you're necessarily born with or have to do. It's just something that you like, and you're absolutely 100% allowed to have an opinion about your favorite type of chocolate, right? He says, on the other hand, when we're talking about Jesus and even getting to heaven, there are no opinions. And this is where he really went hard. And this is the problem with just spirituality. Spirituality really has no real rules. It's all about your relationship. And this is where it can get kind of carried away, if you will, and just say, there's no rules. It's just right. If you're feeling good and you do good stuff, you're saved and you can do whatever the heck you want to. And he went really hardcore, and I think a lot of people needed to hear that. And I'll talk about the other service in just a second. But he went really hardcore, and he says, guys and gals, there is no other way to get to heaven than through Jesus. It's written down in the Bible. There are no opinions about that. You can't just say, hey, I believe all this stuff and I like this and I got baptized as a kid and I'm a good person and for the most part I do good stuff, so I'm going to heaven, but I don't really believe in Jesus. And he's like, no, there's no opinion on this. This is not like the milk chocolate, dark chocolate. He's like, the only way to heaven is through Jesus, period. It's not an opinion. It's not a feeling. It is flat out the truth. And wow, it was so well done. So then I listened to another church service, and I won't name the name, but it was, this is their chance, right, as a pastor to get in front of perhaps a lot of new people and maybe people even on the fence, and just to hit them with truth and grace. You can't just hit them with truth and say, oh, you're going to hell, you're a bad person. You have to hit them with some grace as well. But this other pastor was just like, you know what, just do good things and be nice, and all will go well. And it was just such a different message. It was basically this spirituality, like, you know what, hey, it's all about you, and it's all about just the way you're feeling, and it was a completely different message. And I think that's, where a lot of Christians now are either confused, or if they do know the truth, are a little bit irritated by some pastors and even some religious leaders, taking kind of the easy road, just say, all right, just be a good person and just, be nice, and, maybe go to church a couple times a year, and maybe even don't. And everything will just go well, regardless if you have a relationship with Jesus or not. And so that's the problem with just spirituality, is there are no rules. And so my answer, to that question on the podcast was, I would definitely consider myself, if I'm looking in the spectrum, more on the spiritual side of things and just hardcore religion and always, thumping Bibles and things like that. But at the same point, there is a reason that Christianity has some rules, right? And some pretty stern beliefs, and some pretty well organized things that we all have to believe in, right? And I talked about that on a couple podcasts ago, the resurrection, right? If you thought everything else was great about Christianity, I want to call myself a Christian and I got baptized, but you don't believe Jesus rose from the dead, then there's kind of a problem there. There's a little bit of a mismatch. And so there are some things that we really have to believe in order to call ourselves Christian. And so I think this whole religious versus spiritual, it's tough to just truly answer it and say, oh, there's only one way, right? Just like there's only one way to heaven, because I think there is a blend of the two. But I also think, just watching that movie, The Chosen, I don't think that Jesus wants us as Christians and as a society as a whole to just always just be about the rules, right? And just be 100% religious and only hitting people with truth and no grace, right? We've talked about that on multiple podcasts. I mean, that is the only way usually to bring new people to Christ, is to hit them with truth and grace, which is what Jesus did. And here's what I mean by that. Truth just means throwing out Bible verses, right? And that goes right over most people's heads if they're not ready to hear that, right? And if you just sit there and chastise them with truth, right? Like, hey, you're only going to get to heaven through Jesus. And if someone's not ready to hear that, then, I mean, they're going to think you're a jerk. And it's probably not going to help the situation and probably might even hurt the situation. Whereas if you come in with grace and talk about, you know what, Jesus loves everyone. God will come down to any level. There's nothing in your past that could possibly prevent God or Jesus from not accepting you. Right. And that's the cool part, right? And that's grace, right? Saying that literally Jesus died for our sins and there's nothing in your past, no matter what you've done, even if, you've served prison and killed people, whatever it might be, the worst thing you could possibly think of, God will forgive you. And he's sitting there wanting to have a relationship with you. Jesus wants to have a relationship with you. And I think that's the amazing part. And that's where it is spiritual, right? Because everyone is on a different journey. But at the same point, and this is the really the main piece I want to get across, because this is the danger with just everyone being spiritual, right? Is that spirituality has no real rules. And that's where it can get really, really dangerous and a real slippery slope. That means I can pick and choose what I like about the Bible or about anything that you're thinking about in life. That means I can pick and choose about adultery or pick and choose about drugs or any kind of sin you could possibly imagine. At some point, you have to draw a line in the sand. And at some point, there are some rules and some beliefs that are pretty critical to which way you be heading, if you know what I mean. So I hope that was helpful. This is kind of a short one, but it came up just because I had a really great and interesting conversation with someone who really never thought about it that way. So I said, you know what, you're a smart person, and the fact that you just think everyone's religious, who happens to be a Christian, maybe there's some others that might believe that, or maybe a little bit confused about the two. So hope this was helpful, and I'm sure I missed a few things. If you have any other thoughts on this, or I've heard anyone explain it really well, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. I'm always continually trying to get better, and as both as a communicator and somewhat of an educator, and also just trying to educate myself. So love you guys so much. My private email, Joe, @saltstrong.com. And let me know, what do you consider yourself? More religious or spiritual, or some kind of blend? Religious or spirituous? I don't know. Find a great way to combine those two and let me know. Appreciate you guys. I'll talk to you on the next episode. We out. Peace.
'Cause fishing, it's in my soul, it was pain.